Hello everyone, welcome back to Blockman editor tutorial. In these videos, we will give you a complete introduction to the Blockman editor. This video will introduce the contents related to variables. Alright, let's get started. Enter the editor, let's place a part in the scene. Then we click on the trigger editor for the part. Click the variable button in the upper left corner to open the variable operation interface. Before creating a variable, let's first understand what a variable is. For variables, we can think of it as a box in everyday life to hold something we want to store. For example, we can use the box to hold apples or eggs. In the editor, apples or eggs are equivalent to the game data used in the game logic, such as game score, game duration, etc. Then we can use variables to store this game data. In the variable operations screen, we see three options, which are global variable, entity variable, and UI variable. The difference between them is that global variable can be used and modified by different game characters. For example, there is a global variable X that holds the team score. When player A scores 1 point, the global variable X holds 1. If player B scores one more point, then the data stored in the global variable X becomes 2. As for the entity variable, it can only be used and modified by the current entity. If multiple entities have the same entity variables, the use and modification of these entity variables do not affect each other. For example, there is an entity variable Y, which holds the score of each person. When player A scores 1 point, player A's entity variable Y becomes 1. But for the entity variable Y of player B, it still holds a 0 for the score. As for entity variable and UI variable, they will be explained in future videos. In the variable operations screen, we click on the global variable, and then click on the new button below. In the variable creation screen that appears, we need to first enter a variable name. Note that variable name can only consist of English letters, numbers, and underscores, and must begin with an English letter. Then select the variable's data type. We can see that the variables have 8 data types, and we need to determine which type to choose according to the purpose of the variable. For example, we need to use variables to record the scores. Then, the variable type should be integer. If we need to use a variable to set a new coordinate for the entity, then, the variable type can be 3-dimensional vector or scene coordinates. Note that the data stored in variables are different, depending on their types. Just like some boxes in everyday life are used to store fruits, but some other boxes are used to store medical supplies. The things that can be stored are not the same depending on the type of boxes. For the data types, you can try things out for yourself, and more will be covered in future videos. For the data structure, there are two options here, array, and single variable, and we choose single variable. About array, it is a collection of variables that can hold multiple variables, in other words a more complex type of variable. More about it will be explained in future videos. And finally, the default values. It is used to set the default value of the variables. For example, if it is 0, then it means that the score variable is 0 at this time. If we change it to 10, then the data stored in the score variable will become 10. After confirming the default value, click the Confirm button to complete the creation of the variable. At this point, we can see the score variable we just created in the variable operations screen. If you want to delete a variable, then you can select it and click the Delete button. However, it is important to note that if the variable you want to delete is already used in your game logics, there may be some errors in the game logics after deleting the variable. So be careful when deleting variables. Next, we use the score variable we created to set up a scenario. The scenario is that a player touching a part will increase the score data stored in the score variable by 1. First, we create a new when an entity touches the part trigger node. Find variable in the list of action nodes, and select Set Global Variable. Then select the score in the variable parameter. Because our goal is to make the player increase the score variable by 1 every time they touch the part. Therefore, the value parameter cannot be entered directly as 1, otherwise, the score variable will be 1 every time the player touches the part. Continue dragging out the list of action nodes from the execution port of the value parameter, and find integer operation under the logic node. Drag out the list of action nodes again, at the execution port of the value 1 parameter, and find obtain global variable, under the variable node. Then select the score in the variable parameter. Fill in the value 2 parameter here with 1. The implication of this logic is that the global variable score is increased by 1, and then this result will be stored in the global variable score. Because we want to see the changes in the variable score, we also need to add logic to display the variable score. The completed logic looks like this. Now let's run the game and see the results. That's all for this video. We hope it can help you on your way to a great creator. If you want to know more about the editor, you can comment below the video or post on the official forum. See you in the next video.